After saving her son in a moment of desperation, a wealthy woman approaches a homeless man with an unusual proposal: to be her fiancé for a day at her ex-husband's wedding. What began as a gesture of gratitude transforms into a journey of connection, hope, and overcoming obstacles, revealing that the true riches of life lie beyond appearances. Hello, my friends. I am Linda, and this is Linda's Love Stories. I hope you enjoy this story. In the shaded corners of the park, Anne walked with automatic steps, a quiet and serene place that contrasted with the turmoil in her mind. Beside her, her son Anthony, a 7-year-old boy full of energy and curiosity, absorbed every detail of the environment with his bright eyes. Anne was immersed in her thoughts, a tumultuous mix of worries and tasks to accomplish. She hardly noticed the beauty around her. Concerns about the company she started after the divorce mingled with the anxiety of having to attend the wedding of her ex-husband Damien, who was now with another woman. The weight of these responsibilities weighed heavily on her shoulders, leaving her dazed and distant, while her son hopped cheerfully beside her, absorbing every detail of the world around him with curious and innocent eyes. He chased butterflies, watched the ducks swimming in the lake, and occasionally stopped to admire the colourful flowers that adorned the park. For him, that moment was an adventure, full of discoveries and wonders. Anne's life had undergone a complete turnaround in recent years. Married to Damien since the end of college, where they met and their entrepreneurial passions collided, they not only built a life together, but also founded a company from scratch, and together they shaped their fortune, facing challenges and celebrating successes side by side. When Anthony came into the world, Anne chose to step back a bit from the hustle and bustle of business to care for her son, dedicating herself entirely to him during his early years. However, as time passed, she began to notice subtle changes in her husband's behaviour. He spent more and more time at the office, constantly immersed in projects, and a gap began to form between them. Determined to recapture the harmony they once shared, Anne decided to return to the company. However, in doing so, she was met with a strange and tense environment. It was then that she discovered Damien's betrayal with Jessica, a young newcomer to the company. The impact of the betrayal was devastating, shaking the foundations of trust and stability that Anne had built alongside Damien. Damien's betrayal left Anne devastated. She felt completely disoriented and worried about her son, Anthony. Her greatest concern was how to protect him during this difficult situation and ensure a secure future for him. Anne was filled with uncertainty and anguish, not knowing what to do next. The decisions she had to make seemed overwhelming, and she felt lost. Amid this crisis, Anne knew she would have to find the strength to move forward, not just for herself, but also for her son. Determined to turn things around, Anne made a bold decision. She sold her share of the company and decided to pursue an old dream, embarking on the journey of starting her own business. It was a daring step, but she recognized that it was necessary to rebuild herself. Starting from scratch was daunting, but Anne was excited about the idea of working in a new field that she loved so much. The prospect of building something new, something that reflected her values and vision, filled her with enthusiasm and determination. Despite the challenges that lay ahead, Anne felt a sense of freedom and empowerment as she launched into this new endeavour. Now, immersed in the challenges of building her own company from the ground up and balancing the care of her son Anthony, Anne dove headfirst into an exciting and challenging new reality. Even while maintaining her relationship with Damien to the minimum necessary, Anne dedicated herself wholeheartedly to creating a safe and nurturing environment for Anthony. After a few years of dedication and hard work, Anne had become a successful businesswoman, with her company solidly established in the market. It seemed like her life was finally aligning perfectly, but an unexpected invitation brought forth a storm of long-suppressed emotions. The invitation to Damien's wedding arrived at Anne's doorstep like a sudden blow. All the feelings she had buried during the divorce resurfaced, flooding her with an overwhelming mix of pain, anger, and sadness. Attending her ex-husband's wedding was the last thing Anne wanted. Every fibre of her being resisted the idea of witnessing the celebration of the betrayal that had destroyed her marriage. However, amidst the whirlwind of emotions, a calm voice inside her reminded her that Anthony's well-being came first. Despite her own anguish, Anne knew that going to the wedding was the right decision for her son. He deserved to have his parents united, despite the circumstances, and Anne was willing to bear the weight of this burden out of love for him. Anne walked through the park, a whirlwind of emotions consuming her. The burden of leading her company alone and the news of Damien's wedding deeply shook her. Meanwhile, Anthony played carefreely, unaware of his mother's adult life storms. In a moment of distraction while attending a work call, Anthony wandered off, following a bird flying freely through the park. Anne's heart tightened when she saw her son trip and fall into the lake. She jumped up in a startle, screaming with all the breath she had, "Anthony!" Before she could take a step towards the lake, a nearby homeless man jumped into the water with a quick and courageous movement, saving the boy. All the stress and anguish Anne had been enduring seemed to unleash at that crucial moment. She ran to them, her eyes now brimming not only with tears of relief and gratitude, but also with a torrent of repressed emotions that overflowed. Hugging Anthony with all her being, Anne could no longer contain the tears flooding her face. Her crying was copious and visceral, a release of all the accumulated tension over the recent times. In that embrace, she found a temporary refuge, a moment of vulnerability and connection. With tears in her eyes, Anne exclaimed in gratitude, thank you, I don't know how to thank you." Her heart overflowed with emotion as she looked at the man, all wet from the lake water. He watched Anne hugging her son, silently consenting, as if he understood the deep feeling of relief and gratitude that flooded the moment. The next day, Anne returned to the park, determined to find the man who had saved her son's life, bringing clean clothes and food as a gesture of thanks. Approaching the man, Anne greeted him with a sincere smile. "Sorry to bother you," she began, "but I wanted to thank you again for saving my son's life." The man was Mark, who due to life circumstances started living on the streets and had made the park his home. With a smile on his face, he gratefully accepted the gifts. Concerned, he asked about Anthony's condition, and Anne assured him that he was well, sitting down next to him while he ate, sharing a moment of simple but significant human connection. "And how are you?" Mark asked, observing Anne attentively. "You didn't seem very well yesterday." Anne hesitated for a moment, allowing herself to feel the vulnerability she had kept hidden until then. With a long sigh, she responded, "There are many things happening at the same time, and they have left me a little unsettled. And then that thing with Anthony happened." She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the words in her chest. "I don't know what I would do if something happened to him," she said with a heavy heart. Mark lowered his head in silence, his expression laden with deep and familiar sorrow. "I know how that feels," he murmured with a choked voice. "I lost my son in an accident. He was the same age as your son." Anne looked at Mark with a mix of understanding and compassion, sharing a moment of mutual pain and empathy that transcended the differences in their lives. The park became a daily route for Anne and Anthony, who made sure to stop and talk to Mark whenever they passed by. Anne was intrigued by the man's life. The way he spoke indicated that he had not lived all his life on the streets. As the date of Damien and Jessica's wedding approached, Anne became increasingly distressed at the idea of facing Damien's acquaintances and family in that situation. Walks in the park became a refuge from her daily worries. On one of these walks, Anne and Anthony stopped to talk to Mark. Noticing the concern in Anne's eyes, Mark asked if everything was all right. She explained her ex-husband's wedding situation, venting some of her worries. Anthony, oblivious to the complexity of the situation, excited at the prospect of attending the party, began to speak enthusiastically. "It's going to be a big party. I can't wait. I'm going to wear a really nice outfit that Daddy bought for me." And with the innocence of a child, he extended an invitation to Mark. "You should come with us. There will be plenty of food and you can meet Daddy." Mark laughed at Anthony's innocence but was surprised when Anne agreed with her son. "That's right, you should come with us," she insisted. "It would be a special night. Please, it would be great to have you there so I wouldn't have to face my ex-husband's family alone." Mark hesitated. "What will you tell them? You can't show up at the wedding with someone you found on the street," he said, concerned about the situation. "I will tell the truth, that you saved my son," Anne said. "Or I'll say you're my fiancé," Anne joked, letting out a light laugh. With Anne and Anthony's insistence, Mark ended up accepting the invitation, giving Anne a glimmer of hope amid the worries that consumed her. The wedding day of Damien and Jessica arrived, and Anne, now accompanied by Mark, brought Anthony to the celebration. But she couldn't have imagined the surprises reserved for that night. When they entered the restaurant where the wedding would be celebrated, everyone was surprised to see Anne accompanied. Next to her, Mark looked nothing like the man Anne had met in the park. With his hair cut, beard shaved, and the elegant clothes Anne had given him for the occasion, Mark emanated an aura of confidence and sophistication. He looked like a businessman, impeccable in his appearance. Anne was impressed by the transformation, but her surprise grew even more when Mark started interacting with the people at the party. With his eloquent manner and profound words, he captivated everyone around him, revealing a wisdom and perspective on life that Anne had already noticed in their conversations in the park. However, it was when someone asked Mark about his occupation that Anne was truly surprised. "I am a partner with my brother in the family business," Mark explained calmly. "But I'm currently distant from it. My brother has been taking care of the business alone since the death of my son." The revelation left Anne speechless. She looked at Mark with renewed admiration, realizing that behind his humble appearance lay a story of loss and overcoming that touched her deeply. At that moment, Anne understood that Mark was much more than he seemed at first glance. Seeing the surprise in Anne's eyes, Mark felt it was time to share a bit more of his story with someone who had become a friend over the past few weeks. With a mix of courage and vulnerability, Mark began to explain how the loss of his son in an accident had left him devastated. "I was shattered," he said with sorrow in his voice. "A part of me died with my son that day. Nothing else made sense." He continued, revealing that the unbearable pain led him to divorce and lose his way in life. "I left the business in my brother's hands and wandered aimlessly. I've been on the streets since then," Mark confessed, with sincerity, a mix of sadness and relief for finally sharing his story. "The daily conversations with you and Anthony brought me back to life. You made me feel alive in a way I hadn't felt since the accident." Anne listened intently, touched by the depth of Mark's words. She realized how much their simple daily interactions had meant to him, offering a ray of light amidst the darkness of his pain. In that moment, Anne felt an even stronger connection with Mark. Mark looked at Anne, a tender smile curving his lips. "Hearing your story, how you rose again, made me see that there can be life even after difficulty," he said sincerely. Anne held his hands, moved by his words. He smiled, a glimmer of hope shining in his eyes. "I called my brother," Mark revealed. "I'm going back home and soon I'll return to the company. I'm going to rebuild my life. Thank you so much for everything." With tears in her eyes, Anne hugged Mark tenderly, touched by the sincerity of his words. In that moment, she understood the magnitude of the impact they had had on each other's lives. "Mark," Anne said with an emotional voice, "you were also a light for us. Your presence brought a new perspective to our lives, and we are eternally grateful for that." As Damien's wedding proceeded in the distance, Anne and Mark remained there, sharing stories, laughter, and tears. Between them, a true friendship had flourished, binding them in a bond of compassion and mutual support. As the night drew to a close and everyone dispersed, Anne and Mark exchanged meaningful glances. Amid the uncertainties of life, they had found each other, and that was enough to light their paths ahead. Mark had a long process ahead in resuming his life. The future for the two was uncertain, but as they said goodbye that night, Both knew they had found someone special, someone they could count on. As she watched Mark walk away, Anne felt a mix of emotions flooding her heart. She knew that it wouldn't be the last time they met. There was a connection between them, a mutual trust that transcended words. And even with an uncertain future, she felt grateful to have found someone with whom to share not only the good, but also the bad moments. Mark, for his part, walked with determination, his mind filled with plans to rebuild his life. Even in the face of the challenges he would face, he knew he was not alone. Anne had become a significant presence in his life, someone he could fully trust. And so, with a feeling of hope and a silent promise of reunion, Anne and Mark went their separate ways that night, ready to face whatever the future held, knowing they had found each other to share every step of the way. Sometimes in the unpredictable twists and turns of life, we find precious and unexpected connections. The story of Anne and Mark reminds us that even in the darkest moments, friendship and mutual support can help us overcome challenges and find hope. It teaches us the importance of reaching out to others, even when we are facing our own struggles, sharing our stories, and finding strength in human connection. Have you ever gone through a difficult time that was eased by the presence of someone unexpected in your life? If you enjoyed, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment with a number from 1 to 5 to let us know how much you liked the story. Also, watch the video that is currently on your screen. See you soon.